Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of the Monster's Den. Today we're going to take a look at a spine-chilling entry into the slasher genre. In fact, one of the ones that heavily influenced a lot of these slasher films to come in the 70s. Talking about Black Christmas from 1974. Sure, we had Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. It was probably the first. But there's no doubt that Black Christmas heavily influenced a lot of films to come later on in the decade into the 80s and 90s and so on and so forth. So 1974, this album was released. It's a Canadian film directed by Bob Clark, based on a story written by A. Roy Moore. This was actually inspired. The story was inspired by a series of murders in Montreal. Where urban legend has it, they kind of a whole bunch of people were killed, and the babysitter and the man upstairs is what the whole urban legend was kind of centered on, right? So here for the film, they kind of changed the story around a little bit to a university setting. Filmed it on a budget of $620,000 back in the early 70s. Probably a lot of money then, right? The film brought in $4.1 million in the box office. So the cast for the film, some notable people in this film. Olivia Hussey as Jess Bradford. Okay, she was also in Romeo and Juliet. Lovely Olivia Hussey. You had Keir Dalia, who played Peter Smythe. You had Margot Kidder, okay, as Barbara Cord. Of course, Margot went on to fame and fortune, appearing in those Superman films as Lois Lane. She was also in Brian De Palma's Sisters. You had John Saxon, the always well-used John Saxon, playing Lieutenant Kenneth Fuller. And Andrea Martin, who played Phyllis Carlson. You may remember Andrea from Second City Television back in the late 70s. Okay, also worth noting, Olivia Hussey actually also, besides being a very popular actress throughout the years, also was known for marrying Dean Martin's son. Okay, Dean Peter Martin, I believe was his full name, as well as she was also married, and might still be married, to David Glenn Isley, former lead singer from Giuffria. Okay. So basically the story is, and spoiler alerts, so, if you have not seen the original Black Christmas film, spoiler alerts, because I'm going to talk about the whole film here. All right, so if you have not seen this film, you may want to pause this or come back to it later after you've seen the movie, okay, because I'm going to give lots of tidbits from the film. That's just kind of what we do here. So if you know this film or maybe haven't seen it in a while, here's your chance to, along with me, revisit a little bit. So at the beginning of the movie kind of starts out, you get this kind of unseen guy, and I really like how this film does there's quite a few scenes that kind of take place from the perspective of the killer, of the madman, right? So at the beginning of the film, you see him climbing up the side of this house, and he winds up going into the attic of this big house, and that's how the film kind of starts. You're like, all right, some guy just kind of crawled into a house, into a window, and what's he going to do? We don't know. But you kind of hear him rambling and talking to himself and all that sort of stuff. It's actually a sorority house. So this film takes place right before Christmas. Okay, so everybody's getting ready to go home for Christmas break. It's obviously a bunch of girls live at this house, along with like the sorority mother, I think they call it. She's like an older woman who is kind of there to keep track of everything and make sure run the house and all that sort of thing. And so they're having this big party the night before everybody breaks for Christmas. A couple of girls are getting drunk, and especially Margot Kidder's Barbara character drinks throughout she's just drinking and smoking throughout this entire film. She's like the one kind of weird character that's just all party animal or whatever, and she's constantly drinking whiskey and whatnot. She's got a cigarette going the whole time. Very funny character, but lovely Margot Kidder, pretty hot back in her young days there. So they're having the party, and all of a sudden, they're getting these crank calls, and that's like the creepiest part of this film is this killer who's we later shortly find out is actually hanging out up in their attic. So there's like a basement, 2 levels, and an attic in this gigantic sorority house. So they start to get these crank calls, and the calls are just off the wall. And I think that's, like I said, one of the best things about this film is the phone calls that the killer does, and you get to hear all of them. And he does all these weird voices. Sometimes he sounds like a child, sometimes he sounds like an old man, sometimes he sounds like a demented lunatic escapee from an asylum, sometimes sounds like a woman, and he calls himself Billy. It's Billy! Hey, Billy! This Billy! And it's really disturbing and unsettling. And he goes and changes voices constantly, and it's just, it's one of the best things about this film, and makes it so creepy. So he starts crank calling the house. He starts calling the girls like all sorts of really weird, bad names, which I'm not going to repeat here. You'll have to see in the film. And they're like, oh, it's just some guy, and they keep hanging up on him. He keeps calling back, right? So then all of a sudden, one by one, the girls in the house start disappearing, right? So at the beginning of the film, one woman, I forget the one's name, she winds up disappearing. She goes up into the attic. She starts hearing noises up there. She goes up in the attic. She goes to her room, and he's hanging out in her room. And he winds up she goes into the closet because she hears noises from the closet, like these weird noises, baby noises coming from the closet. She goes, what's there? Who's there? And he's in the closet, so he wraps plastic wrap, the plastic that you would cover like a dress or something like that, or a suit or something like that. And he strangles her and asphyxiates her, and then he drags her upstairs to the attic, where he proceeds to put her in a rocking chair with the plastic over her. Right now, so she's dead. So one gone. Nobody knows where she is, right? So that's kind of like the storyline here. It's one by one he goes after all the women of the house, all the girls of the house. But all of this going on, there's this little subplot. So Olivia Hussey, who is, like I said, basically the star of this show, or this movie, her character, Jess, is dating this music student named Peter. And he looks a little older. I'm not really sure if he is or not, but so they've got kind of a weird relationship. It seems like he wants to get really serious, whereas she just wants to finish her schoolwork, and she's fine with dating him. But there's a little subplot going on that she actually is pregnant, and she's trying to tell him, right? So, and she wants to get an abortion. So throughout this film, there's this subplot. Eventually, she does tell him that she's pregnant. He's like, well, we got to get married and all this kind of stuff. And she's like, no, I'm going to get an abortion. I'm not ready. And he's like, and he gets very angry with her. It's like, you can't kill our baby. That's my baby. You're not going to do that. You'll be sorry if you do that. So there's, all of a sudden, we're starting to, they're trying to plant in your head that possibly, Peter is pretty unsettled by all this, right? The moody music major, right? Boyfriend of the main star. She's pregnant. He wants to have the baby. She doesn't. So it's almost like they're trying to kind of feed that into you. So you start to think, well, maybe he's not such a good guy. He's a little bit off his rocker, right? Or he's just so emotional by what's going on. So then, as the movie kind of unfolds, you're going to start one by one. People are going to get off. That's the way it goes, right? So then you got Mrs. Mack, who's the older woman who's kind of in charge of the sorority house. So she gets lured into the attic, right? Later on, she's been drinking. This is after the party and all that kind of stuff, and she winds up getting killed. And it's a really great scene because she's it's like one of those kind of attics where you have the pull down door, right? And you got to crawl up like a little ladder type of thing. And so she goes up there, and her top half is above the hole in the floor where the ladder goes up. And she's looking around. She hears these noises. Who's up there? Who's up there? She's looking for the cat, right? Because the house has a cat. And it's like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? But the killer is there, and he's got one of those kind of I'm going to say meat hook, but I think you know what I'm talking about. It's and why it's hanging up there, I have no idea, up in the attic. But basically, it's on a chain. It's got a hook, and he just goes and throws it. And it swings and nails her right in the face. He hoists her up, hangs her, suffocates her, right? So she's hanging there dead. You got the other girl is in the rocking chair, with the plastic over her. She's dead, right? So there you got two gone, right? Amidst all this, there was a girl from another house who has been missing for a day or two, because obviously since this crazy guy came to town, again, you don't know who he is, where he's from, okay? You don't see him really, other than maybe his eye or part of his face, and you hear him, right? So she goes, she's missing. They got all the police and people from the town are out looking for her. They got the whole search party. They eventually find her. They find her dead in a park, right? So, but now you get, you start, so the one dead girl who's in the rocking chair who got asphyxiated, her father shows up to pick her up, to take her home for the holidays, and she's nowhere to be found. Nobody knows where she is, right? So he's getting all nervous and antsy and whatever. He's hanging around the house. More calls are coming in, right? Crazy calls, and everybody's getting freaked out by who is this guy who keeps calling this house, right? So eventually, as the film goes on, Jess winds up calling the police. It's like to let them know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, everybody starts to suspect Peter, because Peter is like getting a nerve. They go to his house to talk to him. He's all pissed off about the fact that she wants to kill the baby, and all this kind of stuff. So he's a piano player. So he bashes his piano. They go there. He's not there. They find the piano all screwed up and whatever. So the cops are starting to think, we need to talk to this guy, Peter. What's going on with him, So they finally get the whole message, the whole gist of it from Jess about how she's pregnant, and she does, she told him, and he's upset about it. So they're starting to think, maybe Peter's the one who's behind all this crazy stuff, right? So then, fast forward a little bit, it's now nighttime, and the carolers are both singing around the radio, around the neighborhood. So the carolers and all these young kids show up at the sorority house to sing carols, and Jess, everybody else is either asleep or whatever in the house, or dead, obviously, as we know. She goes out to the front door, listening to the carolers, and she's enjoying their songs. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Barb, who's Margot Kidder's character, who has been drunk this entire film, they finally, at some point, they convinced her to go to bed because she's just rambling about, drunk. She's getting into arguments with people. So she goes to bed, and the killer winds up sneaking into her room and stabs her a bunch of times with like a kind of like a glass like ornament or something. Okay, and it's got like a point at the edge. He just bludgeons her in the bed. Okay, so she's gone. So then the police they're like, all right, we're going to try and start tracing these calls that are coming into the house, right? Because there's all sorts of weird stuff going on. We find a dead girl in the park, so, what are we going to do here? So, but the thing is, as you know, with tracing calls, especially back in those days, you have to keep whoever it is on the phone as long as possible so they can go into this big place where all the phone calls are coming in. They have to go follow. It's this whole crazy scenario, right? So, eventually, as we're about like the hour mark into this film, one of the last calls that he makes, he's got Jess on the phone for a long time, and he's just spewing all sorts of stuff. And again, the phone calls are the scariest part of this film, because he's just an absolute lunatic, right? He's a lunatic, and every now and then they show little scenes of him upstairs in the attic, and he's rampaging around, he's screaming and knocking things over and all this kind of stuff, and all these weird voices. So they trace the call, and they're like, oh shit, he's in the house. He's making the call from another phone within the house. I guess there were multiple phone lines in the house. So they relay the call to the lieutenant, which is John Saxon's character. He's like, what's going on? What's going on? We traced the call. He's in the house. Get her out of the house. He's like, all right, I'm going to be on my way. He's out in the car. And he's like, call her and tell her, don't tell her what's going on, but tell her she needs to get out of the house, just to walk out the front door. All right. So the bumbling idiot sergeant from the police headquarters, right, who's like the comic relief in this film. And there's a hilarious earlier scene where they go to the police department to report all these calls that are happening, and Margot Kidder's character is joking around with, and of course she's hammered, she's whatever, and he's asking her for the phone number to the sorority house. So she, instead of giving, they didn't do numbers, so because back in the old days, they used to attach the phone number with letters, right? So she gives him she's joking around with him, and she's like, oh yeah, the number, it's fellatio. And he's like, fellatio? It's like, yeah, it's first three, F-E-L-A-T-I-O, and he has no clue what fellatio is. So she's laughing, and he's like writing it down. He's like, oh, okay, so that's, he's equating it to whatever the numbers are. Yeah, but I never heard of those numbers before. And she's like, oh yeah, it's a new exchange for the area. He's like, all right, whatever. He's so gullible, right? So that comes back to haunt him later on when he gives them all the paperwork from the write-up, and his fellow officers see that he wrote down the phone number was fellatio, right? So anyway. So, needless to say, he calls up the house, he gets Jess on the phone, and lets her, says, all right, so I just spoke to the lieutenant, you need to leave the house, whatever. Oh, but my two friends, Barb and such, are upstairs sleeping. I said, nope, don't do anything, just go right out of the house. She's like, but why? You need to tell me why. He's like, don't go out of the house, he's in the house. So she starts screaming for Barb and for Phyllis, I think her name was, and she's screaming. So eventually she grabs a poker, and she goes upstairs. And so she goes upstairs and she opens up Barb's room, and there is Barb and Phyllis dead on the bed. Okay, blood all over the place, and the killer's behind the door. So she sees him, she sees the eye. You usually only see like his eye or whatever. So she slams the door on him. He screams in pain and frustration. So then he starts chasing her around the house, goes grabbing her hair. She somehow gets away from him and goes down to the basement, locks the door. Okay. He's like trying to break in. He's all screaming, rambling, all sorts of crazes. Again, you don't really see him, right? So she's down in the basement. So she's trying to find a place to hide in the basement. All of a sudden, she sees a shadow outside the basement windows from outside, and someone calling her name. So she's like, "Who is that?" And then finally, the camera starts to, and it's Peter, her boyfriend, who's outside. So the viewer, you're starting to think, okay, how is it that he ironically shows up just as all this shit's going on, right? So he's got to be the guy, right? He's got to be the guy. So he eventually, he's like, "Jess, are you down there? You down there?" And I'm thinking, why would he think that she's in the basement? Obviously, he tried to get in upstairs, and the door was locked, right? Okay. But why would he think she's in the basement? There's no lights on down there. Very strange. He can't see through the window. So he breaks the window, he climbs in, he goes, "Jess, is that you? Jess, is that you? Are you over there?" And she's in the corner. She's got the poker that she grabbed from the fireplace. And he goes up to go, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" He goes up to her. And just as that happens, cue to outside. The police cars are showing up outside. All you hear is a woman screaming. So they break into the house. The cops break into the house. They go downstairs, and there she is in the corner. Okay, just kind of in shock with Peter in her lap with blood all over his face. Obviously, she impaled his head or, just bludgeoned him to death, right? So Peter is dead, right? So then we cut to, I guess, a couple hours later. Or it may still be that same night. I don't even know. You don't really know. She's in bed, sleeping. The cops are all around the place. They're all talking to each other, whatever. They're, talking about, how can't believe he snapped like this, and killed all those people and whatever. But they still can't find the couple missing people, right? They don't know where they are. The father of the one girl, the first one who was killed, he's there. He's he passes out. He's, taken to the hospital because he's under such stress because they don't know where his daughter is and all this kind of stuff. And all the cops are like, "Okay, so you know what? I think we've done all we can do here right now. Jess is under some sedative. She's going to sleep probably for 6 hours. Right? We'll leave her be. We'll come back tomorrow." All this kind of stuff. And I'm like, all right. So all the cops leave. They all leave. Next thing you know, the camera kind of starts to drift up through the house, and you start to hear someone talking. Goes to the hole and the entryway to the attic, and there you see obviously the two bodies up there still, and you hear him talking. "It's Billy. It's Billy," and he's up there. He's still up there. So I'm thinking, why didn't they search that attic? Now, wouldn't you think that a police force would search this entire house? Because they already knew that the killer, who they think is Peter, who's now dead, he was hiding in the house, right? So wouldn't you want to find out where he was hiding and what's going on with this house? But they didn't search anything. So they other than the two, and you had two dead bodies on the second floor, which they found. So wouldn't that entire house, why would they let her sleep in the house, first of all? Okay, there were two dead bodies on the second floor in one of the bedrooms. So now they're just going to let her sleep in her own bed in the house where two murders and a killing of a possible, murderer just took place. And they're not going to bring her to a hospital. They're going to leave her there. And they're not going to search the whole place. And then, you see a shot from outside. There's no yellow tape around the house. Nothing. It's just like, all right, we'll be back. That sort of thing. So is this the stupidest police force known to man? I don't know. But doesn't take away from these are the 70s, right? A lot of films just had lots of plot holes and things like that. But it's just very, very strange. And then the film ends with a wide shot of the outside of the house. It's very dark out. This looks to be some guy standing out on the front step. I don't know. Is it a cop that was just supposed to be, they told just to kind of stay there? I don't know. But then all of a sudden, you hear the phone ring. And that's how the film ends, with the credits roll and the phone just rings and rings and rings and rings and rings. Nobody's answering it. So that's the end of the film. So crazy guy, Billy, whatever his name is still in the house. These inept cops didn't search the house, so they didn't find him. He's right there, right? So just a very, very cool, demented film. Not very bloody. Again, most of the violence is kind of suggested, so it's kind of a theme that we talked about in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a couple of weeks ago. But I think it's just a really chilling film because, for a number of reasons, okay? A, you really don't know who this killer is. You don't really see him other than some fleeting glimpses of his eye, half his face, maybe a shadow or his arm. That's about all you see. You don't know who he is. You don't know where he's from, okay? You know by the end of the film that they didn't catch him, so it's like, so what else is he going to do, right? Where's he going to go next? The phone calls are just absolutely disturbing and horrific, and that, for me, makes this whole film. Because it's just like, this guy is just a complete psychopath. Right, and they did such a fantastic job of it. And the way he goes from all these different voices, like one after the other within a single call. It's very, very creepy. Very creepy. They talk about how this film really influenced John Carpenter's Halloween, and how he originally was talking about, ways to maybe make a sequel, but instead, decided to make a totally separate film, obviously. And it's one of the true, early slasher greats, right, especially of the 70s. Camera work is dynamite throughout the whole film, and like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times they have the camera coming from the killer's perspective as he's kind of moving around through the attic and the house and whatnot, and that's pretty creepy. Really well done. They made a couple remakes of this. I watched one of them, which was just pretty terrible. That was 2006, and then they decided to make another one in 2019. So it's not, is it? I mean, I know that everybody, all these movie studios love making remakes, but it's like, you made one in 2006, it was a bust, and you got to come back and make another one in 2019? It's like, ugh. And even the one in 2006, I didn't see the 2019 one, but the 2006 one wasn't very close to the original. Some similarities, but man, stop remaking classics, is my opinion. The first one is so good for what it is. It's low budget, it's creepy. It defies logic at times, but I just totally dig it. I think it's a really good one. So there you have it. Black Christmas from 1974, directed by Bob Clark. A true influential film in the slasher genre. Okay, featuring a very cool monster that we don't know who he is. We never find out who he is, and but I think that's what's kind of really cool about it. So it's good that they kind of they ended this film with a big question mark, as opposed to either very happy ending or a very terrible ending. Here it's just kind of ambiguous. You don't know, right? So there you have it. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Tune in again sometime later in the month of August. We'll do another Monsters Den. So till then, stay tuned for lots of other music programming that'll be coming at you each and every day. Don't miss any of it, all right? So take care, guys. Bye-bye.